Growl was a physical force, rattling Brea's teeth. The shadow that detached itself from the gloom wasn't merely a trick of the fading light. It solidified into a hulking, grotesque shape, too large for a lone wolf, too feral for a pack rogue. Its fur was matted, its eyes twin points of malevolent, yellowish light, and a slavering maw gaped open, revealing fangs that gleamed wickedly in the twilight. The stench of it hit her first, not the clean, wild scent of an apex predator, but a foul, decaying odor, a reek of corrupted flesh and ancient fear that clawed at the back of her throat, making her gag. Instinct, raw and unthinking, screamed at her to run, to fight, to transform. But Brea had no wolf. She was a hollow echo, a human skin stretched over an empty space where primal power should reside. Yet the ingrained survival mechanism of her shifter blood fired, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She scrambled backward, dropping the herbs she'd gathered, her fingers digging into the cold, damp earth. The creature lunged, a low, guttural snarl ripping from its throat, and Brea threw herself to the side, narrowly avoiding the snapping jaws that bit deep into the air where her head had been moments before. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She could feel the vibration of its heavy paws as it landed, heard the guttural rasp of its breathing, thick and wet. Her eyes darted wildly, not just at the monstrous wolf, but to the unmoving silhouette of Rurik Fenlo, still standing by the ancient oaks. He hadn't stirred. He hadn't even blinked, it seemed. His gaze remained fixed on her, an unwavering, almost predatory intensity that offered no comfort, no intervention. Was this a test? A cruel demonstration of her utter vulnerability, of the freedom he had so publicly granted, and so subtly revoked? The thought ignited a desperate fury within her, a spark of defiance against the fear that threatened to consume her. The corrupted wolf circled, its movements heavy, deliberate, as if savoring the hunt. Its yellow eyes never left her, tracking her every trembling breath. Brea pushed herself onto her knees, scanning her surroundings for anything. A branch, a stone, a means of escape. The standing stones, ancient and imbued with forgotten power, seemed to mock her, silent sentinels to her impending demise. Her breath hitched, ragged and shallow. She was going to die here, alone, watched by the very man who claimed to have released her. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. The creature lunged again, faster this time. Brea let out a choked cry, a sound that tore from her throat, raw and desperate. She instinctively put up her arms, a futile gesture against the beast's power, but just as the fangs were about to sink into her flesh, a blur of motion, impossibly fast, erupted from the tree line. It wasn't Rurik. A flash of silver fur, a low, savage snarl, and a lean, powerful wolf launched itself at the corrupted beast. The impact was bone-jarring, a thunderclap of colliding bodies that shook the ground. The air filled with furious growls, the snap of jaws, and the sickening rip of flesh. The newcomer was smaller than the monstrous attacker, but moved with a fluid, deadly grace, a true wolf, pure and untamed. Its fur was the color of moonlight on fresh snow, its eyes a startling, intelligent blue, filled with a focused, primal rage. It was a she-wolf, a lone wolf, bearing no pack scent Brea recognized. The two beasts became a whirlwind of teeth and claws, rolling across the forest floor, tearing at each other with unbridled ferocity. Brea scrambled backward, pressing herself against the cold stone of one of the monoliths, gasping for breath, her entire body trembling. The battle was brutal, primal, a terrifying dance of death. The corrupted wolf, though larger, seemed sluggish, its movements less precise, its attacks fueled by a mindless aggression. The she-wolf, however, fought with a calculated savagery, darting in, inflicting damage, and retreating before the bigger beast could retaliate effectively. As she watched, mesmerized by the violent ballet, Brea noticed Rurik. He hadn't moved an inch, but his body was coiled, tense, his jawline taut. His eyes, fixed on the struggle, held an intensity that could shatter stone. A low, rumbling growl, impossibly deep, vibrated from his chest, a sound of restrained power, of barely leashed fury. He was watching, calculating. He still hadn't intervened. Suddenly, the she-wolf found an opening. With a guttural snarl, she lunged at the corrupted beast's throat, her fangs sinking deep. The monstrous wolf let out a gurgling shriek, a sound of agony and rage, thrashing wildly. Its struggles grew weaker, its roars turning into desperate whimpers, until with a final, shuddering gasp, it went limp. The she-wolf released her grip, blood staining her pristine fur, and stood over the fallen foe, chest heaving, a low, triumphant growl rumbling in her throat. Her blue eyes, still blazing with the fire of battle, flickered towards Brea, then to Rurik, a silent challenge, warning. Then, as swiftly and silently as she had appeared, she vanished back into the shadows of the forest, leaving behind only the metallic scent of fresh blood and the lingering reek of corruption. Brea was alone again, left with the gruesome aftermath. The body of the corrupted wolf lay motionless, a grotesque heap of matted fur and broken bone, a chilling testament to the unseen dangers lurking at the edges of the packlands. Her gaze drifted back to Rurik. He began to move then, slowly, deliberately, detaching himself from the shadows of the ancient trees. Each step was measured, powerful, his presence growing with every footfall. The air crackled around him, thick with his scent, pine, storm, raw power, now underscored by a dangerous, barely suppressed fury. He stopped a few feet from her, his immense form casting a long shadow over her trembling figure. He looked down at her, his obsidian eyes unreadable, reflecting the dying light of the sky. Brea found herself unable to look away, a strange mix of fear and an undeniable primal draw pulling her gaze to his. He knelt, his movements fluid despite his size, and his scarred hand reached out, not to touch her, but to trace the outline of the dead wolf's paw print in the soft earth beside her. What was that? Brea's voice was a mere whisper, hoarse from fear, her throat tight. Rurik didn't answer immediately. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the tree line where the she-wolf had disappeared, then returning to Brea. His eyes seemed to pierce right through her, seeing past the layers of fear and shame into the deepest parts of her being. A rogue, he finally rumbled, his voice low, a controlled tremor beneath the calm. Corrupted by ancient magic. Not of this pack, or any pack known to us. He still hadn't acknowledged her peril, her near death. The blatant disregard for her experience, even as his presence pulsed with a possessive energy, was infuriating. "And you just watched?" she challenged, her voice gaining a fragile strength, fueled by a surge of indignant anger. "You stood there and let it happen." A muscle in his jaw flexed, but his expression remained impassive. "You survived," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "You are stronger than you know, Brea Whitlock." The words, instead of offering comfort, felt like a judgment, a cold, hard truth. He was right. She had survived, but not because of him, because of a mysterious she-wolf. The humiliation of her wolflessness burned anew. He took another step closer, his shadow engulfing her entirely. His scent, intoxicating and dangerous, filled her senses, blurring the edges of her fear, stirring a latent recognition deep within her. He reached out again, this time his hand coming to rest, not on her, but on the standing stone beside her, his fingers brushing against the rough surface where she leaned. It was a claim, a silent declaration of ownership over the space around her. "The bond was severed," Brea whispered, her voice cracking. "You released me." Rurik's eyes darkened, a flicker of something raw and untamed passing through their depths. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly tone that seemed to vibrate directly through her bones. "I released you from my direct claim, Brea. I never said I released you from existence, or from my protection." He paused, his gaze dropping to her throat, then back to her eyes. "There are other ways to claim what is mine. Other ways to ensure what I keep, no one else can touch." His words sent a shiver down her spine, not entirely of fear this time, but of a strange, unsettling thrill. It was a possessive declaration, chilling in its implication. He wasn't her mate, but he wasn't letting her go. He was simply removing her from the game, making her his untouchable prize. The danger, she realized, hadn't ended with the rogue wolf's death. It had only just begun. He straightened, his immense form once again overshadowing her. His eyes swept over the fallen beast, then back to the darkening forest, as if searching for the mysterious she-wolf. A low, almost imperceptible growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of dominance, a warning to any unseen presence. He turned back to Brea, his gaze lingering on her face. The primal connection, once severed, now felt reforged, tighter, more suffocating than before. "Come," he commanded, his voice devoid of softness, yet with an underlying current that brooked no argument. "You will not be out here alone again." He didn't offer a hand, he simply turned, expecting her to follow. Brea, her legs still trembling, pushed herself up. As she moved, her gaze fell upon the rough stone where Rurik had placed his hand. A faint, almost invisible mark, the symbol of the Shadowfell Pack, seemed to glow faintly, etched into the ancient stone as if by his very touch. And then, as her fingers brushed against the spot where her own hand had rested, she felt a subtle heat, a tingling sensation, and saw, for a fleeting moment, a faint pulsing light beneath her skin. The ghost of a bond, a mark she didn't understand, yet felt in the very depths of her soul. Rurik paused at the edge of the clearing, turning his head slightly, his gaze piercing the gloom, as if he could feel the subtle shift in her. The air around her suddenly felt impossibly heavy, charged with a potent, undeniable current. She realized then that the most dangerous bond wasn't the one he'd publicly broken, but the one he refused to let anyone else touch. And that mark, unseen by others, was his silent, inescapable claim. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, but beneath it, Brea could still detect the metallic tang of blood and the lingering, putrid reek of the corrupted rogue. Her legs were shaky, her heart still thrumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Rurik Fenlo moved ahead, his stride long and unhurried, yet somehow conveying an immense, barely contained power. He didn't look back, didn't check if she was following, but Brea knew, with an unsettling certainty, that he was acutely aware of her presence. It was in the subtle tension in his shoulders, the almost imperceptible tilt of his head, the way his powerful scent seemed to broaden and envelop the path they walked. He was a silent sentinel, his command an invisible leash. The forest, now fully surrendered to the night, pressed in on them, a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made Brea flinch, her senses on high alert. Her human ears, usually so inadequate, seemed to strain for any sign of movement, any hint of the lurking dangers that Rurik had so casually allowed to threaten her. The image of the monstrous wolf, its yellow eyes burning with malice, flashed in her mind, swiftly followed by the fierce, protective grace of the silver she-wolf. Who was she? Why had she intervened when the Alpha King had not? The questions spun in Brea's mind, a chaotic dance of fear and unanswered mysteries. The mark on her hand, where she'd touched the ancient stone, still tingled faintly, a ghost of warmth beneath her skin. It was an odd sensation, not painful, but an insistent hum, a subtle awareness that resonated with Rurik's towering presence beside her. She glanced at his back, broad and unyielding. He had called her his, claimed her as forbidden, yet offered no comfort, no explanation for the chilling disappearances, no apology for his inaction. It was a possessiveness devoid of tenderness, a claim that felt more like a cage than a promise. They reached the outskirts of the pack village, the soft glow of hearth fires visible through the trees, the familiar scent of wood smoke, baking bread, and the mingling aromas of various pack members brought a strange mix of relief and renewed anxiety. Relief to be out of the immediate danger of the wilds, anxiety about facing the pack's scrutiny after what had transpired. Her public rejection had been a scar, a brand of shame. To be seen with Rurik now, after his silent guardianship and veiled threats, would only deepen the mystery surrounding her, marking her as something even more ambiguous and unsettling. As they emerged into the clearing that served as the village square, a hush fell over the few pack members still out and about. Heads turned, conversations died. Eyes, quick and assessing, darted from Rurik's imposing figure to Brea's trembling one. She could feel their gazes, a palpable weight of curiosity, fear, and apprehension. They knew about the disappearances. They knew about her. They saw the Alpha King, the man who had publicly cast her aside, now walking at her side, his presence a silent, undeniable declaration. The pack's reaction was a stark confirmation of her growing dread. Rurik's rejection had indeed not been release, but a repositioning, a subtle, deadly claim that put her beyond the reach of others. A group of younger betas, usually boisterous and full of restless energy, were gathered near the communal fire pit. Their laughter died abruptly, replaced by stiff postures and averted gazes as Rurik passed. One of them, a lean young man named Hestia, who had once offered Brea assistance with a heavy load of firewood, met her eyes for a fleeting moment. In his gaze she saw not longing, but a stark, undeniable fear. He quickly looked away, his jaw tight, his shoulders hunched. It was a silent, chilling testament to the unseen price of Rurik's protection. Brea's cabin was small, secluded, tucked away from the main cluster of homes, almost an exile within the village. Rurik followed her to its threshold, his vast presence filling the small space around her. He paused there, his back to the flickering light of the village, his face obscured by shadow. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the sheer power of his wolf thrumming beneath his skin. "You are safe here," he stated, his voice a low, rough rumble. It wasn't a question, but a decree. "The corrupted ones. They are growing bolder. I will ensure they do not breach these wards again." Brea turned to face him, a surge of frustration battling with her fear. "Why?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a desperate edge. "Why now? You cast me out. You let me believe I was free. Why am I still a target? Why are others disappearing?" Rurik's shadow deepened. His eyes, when they finally met hers, were pools of impenetrable darkness. "The reasons are complex, Brea. Matters of ancient blood, of power. Things you do not understand." "Then explain them," she cried, a sudden, reckless courage rising within her. "Because I do understand this. Men are dying. Men who showed me kindness, who dared to look at me without contempt. And you, Alpha King, you simply watch, you allow it, and then you call me yours, as if I am a possession, a thing to be claimed but never truly valued." Her words, raw and unfiltered, hung in the cold night air, an audacious challenge to his authority. For a long moment, Rurik remained silent, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. Brea braced herself for his fury, for the crushing weight of his displeasure, but it never came. Instead, a subtle shift occurred in his eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible softening, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar mask of stoic command. He took a single deliberate step closer, his hand reaching out, not towards her face, as she instinctively braced for, but towards the collar of her tunic. His large, calloused fingers brushed against the fabric, then dipped beneath it, just for a fleeting second, against the skin of her throat. A jolt, sharp and unexpected, coursed through Brea. It wasn't just physical. It was an electric current that seemed to bypass her skin and travel directly to the core of her being, a spark of primal recognition that made her breath catch. He withdrew his hand just as swiftly, leaving her skin tingling, burning. "You are not a possession, Brea," he said, his voice softer now, a deep resonance that vibrated through her. "You are a responsibility and a secret, one I will protect, even from myself." His gaze dropped to her throat again, then to her left wrist, where the faint warmth of the mark still lingered. His eyes narrowed, a flash of something unreadable, recognition, concern, crossing his features. The bond was severed publicly, yes, but some bonds are not so easily broken, not so easily erased. They simply change their nature. And in changing, they become stronger, more tenacious, more dangerous. He paused, and Brea held her breath, mesmerized by the intensity in his eyes. The corrupted rogues are drawn to a primal essence, an awakening, an ancient power that has lain dormant, now stirring, and you, Brea, you are at its center. Her mind reeled. An awakening? An ancient power? She was wolfless, barren, and omega. What power could she possibly possess? The shame of her perceived inadequacies warred with the chilling implication of his words. "But I have no wolf," she whispered, the old wound aching. "I am nothing." Rurik's head tilted slightly, a dark shadow in the moonlight. "Your wolf may be silent, Brea, but it is not absent. And its silence, its hidden nature, makes it even more potent. It is a mystery, and mysteries are often the most powerful lures." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, a possessive scrutiny that left her feeling exposed, seen to her very soul. The others who showed you interest, they were not threats in themselves. They were merely distractions. Pathways for the corrupted to find you. I removed the pathways. The cold, brutal logic of his words struck Brea with horrifying clarity. He hadn't punished them out of spite, but out of a calculated, terrifying protectiveness. He hadn't wanted to hurt them. He had simply wanted to remove any connection they might inadvertently forge with her, severing them as he had severed himself, to keep her isolated, safe, and irrevocably his, albeit in this unspoken, terrifying way. You exiled Garrick, she accused, her voice trembling. You had Tobin killed. Fendrel vanished. Rurik's expression hardened, the brief flicker of something softer receding entirely. I do what is necessary to protect my pack. And what is mine? His voice was low, a dangerous growl. Their fates were their own. They chose to ignore the unspoken warnings, and the threat they posed, however unwitting, was too great. Brea stared at him, her chest heaving. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded efficiency of his actions, horrified her. He was a king burdened by destiny, yes, but he was also a ruthless, calculating force, and she was caught in his web. The air around them grew heavy, charged with unspoken declarations. He was claiming her, but not in love, not in partnership, but as a guarded treasure, a dangerous secret. Stay within the village perimeter, Rurik commanded, his gaze sweeping over her face one last time, an almost possessive warmth in their dark depths that contradicted his harsh words. And do not speak of what you saw tonight, or of the other wolf. He turned then, his cape swirling around him, and strode away, disappearing into the shadows of the village, leaving Brea alone at her cabin door. The cold night air rushed in, chilling her skin, but the spot on her throat where his fingers had brushed still burned with that strange electric heat. Her hand instinctively went to it, then to her left wrist, where the mark pulsed with a faint, insistent warmth. She closed her eyes, trying to process the horrifying implications of his words. She was not free. She was a secret, a responsibility, a lure for ancient evil. And the Alpha King, the man who had publicly rejected her, was her silent, possessive jailer, willing to sacrifice anyone who dared to come near her. As she stepped inside her cabin, the scent of him lingered, pine, storm, and a hint of something primal, something that stirred a deep, forgotten chord within her. The faint glow on her wrist pulsed again, stronger this time, not on her hand, but beneath her skin, on her left forearm. She pulled back her sleeve, her breath catching. There, just above her wrist, was a faint silvery mark, intricate and swirling, like ancient script woven into her flesh. It wasn't a scar, but a brand, a subtle tattoo of light. It pulsed with a soft, ethereal light, mirroring the thrumming in her veins. It was the symbol of the Shadowfell pack, the same mark she had seen etched onto the stone, but now it was a living, breathing part of her. It was his claim, and it was awakening. And as she stared at it, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread from the mark, a warmth that felt strangely comforting, deeply unsettling, and undeniably tied to the feared Alpha King. The bond, she realized with a sickening lurch, had never been broken at all. It had merely been waiting for the right moment to reveal its true, terrifying nature. The silvery mark on Brea's forearm pulsed with a soft, ethereal light, mirroring the erratic beat of her heart. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat, a wave of profound bewilderment washing over her. It was intricate, a swirl of ancient symbols that coalesced into the familiar, stylized wolf's head of the Shadowfell pack. But it wasn't merely an emblem, it felt alive, warm beneath her skin, a tangible connection to a power she had always been denied. How could this be? She was wolfless, barren, an omega cast aside. This mark was a symbol of belonging, of inherent pack strength, of a bond. And yet here it was, undeniable, a living tattoo glowing faintly in the dim light of her cabin. Rurik's words echoed in her mind, chilling and prophetic. The bond was severed publicly, yes, but some bonds are not so easily broken, not so easily erased. They simply change their nature, and in changing, they become stronger, more tenacious, more dangerous. And then, your wolf may be silent, Brea, but it is not absent. Was this it? Was this mark a manifestation of that changed bond, of a silent wolf, of the ancient power he spoke of? The sheer enormity of the implication settled over her, heavy and suffocating. She wasn't just marked. She was claimed, not by a mate, but by a destiny she couldn't comprehend, tethered to a king who was both her protector and her jailer. The following days bled into weeks, each one a torment of isolation and heightened awareness. The mark remained, a constant, subtle warmth on her forearm, sometimes flickering brighter, sometimes dimming to a barely perceptible glow. It was a secret she guarded fiercely, hidden beneath the long sleeves of her tunics, yet its presence was a constant reminder of her altered reality. The pack's avoidance of her deepened. Children, usually curious and unafraid, would duck their heads and hurry away when she approached. Adults would avert their gazes, their shoulders stiff, their conversations abruptly dying. It was a silent, collective ostracization, not born of malice, but of fear. The Alpha King's unspoken claim, his deadly protection, had made her untouchable, a pariah. Her cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. She rarely ventured beyond the village perimeter, obeying Rurik's command, but also fearing the unknown dangers that lurked in the forest, and the known danger that watched from afar. She saw him occasionally, Rurik Fenlo, a dark, imposing silhouette against the pale light of dawn as he overlooked the training grounds, or a fleeting shadow disappearing into the dense woods on his patrols. He never approached, never acknowledged her directly in front of others, yet Brea felt his gaze, a phantom touch, whenever he was near. The mark on her arm would hum, a faint vibration under her skin, a resonance with his powerful presence. It was a constant, unsettling reminder of the invisible thread that bound them. The mystery of the silver she-wolf gnawed at Brea. Who was she? Why had she saved her? Was she a rogue, like the corrupted beast she'd dispatched? Or something else entirely? A flicker of hope, however faint, stirred within Brea that perhaps this wolf, too, was a protector, an ally against the unseen currents that now swept her life. She tried to glean information, subtly asking questions of the market vendors, but met only blank stares and hurried changes of subject. The pack was tight-lipped about anything that touched the Alpha King's domain or the growing darkness at their borders. One evening, driven by a desperate need for answers, Brea decided to risk a visit to Hestia, the pack's oldest shaman, a woman whose eyes held the wisdom of centuries. Hestia lived in a small, ancient dwelling on the quietest edge of the village, surrounded by hanging herbs and the scent of forgotten spells. Brea approached with trepidation, the fear of pack censure a cold knot in her stomach. Hestia's door was ajar, and a soft, earthy light spilled from within. Brea hesitated, then pushed it open. The air inside was warm, heavy with the scent of dried herbs, wood smoke, and something else, a faint metallic tang that sent a shiver down Brea's spine. Hestia sat by a small fire, stirring a steaming cauldron, her back to Brea. Her silver hair was braided, thick as rope, and cascaded down her back. "I knew you would come, little wolf," Hestia said, her voice raspy, ancient, without turning. The threads of fate, once tangled, become impossible to ignore. Brea froze. Little wolf. The words, meant for one with a spirit animal, felt like a cruel mockery. "I have no wolf, Hestia," Brea whispered, her voice tight with pain. "I am wolfless." Hestia slowly turned. Her eyes, milky with age, seemed to pierce through Brea's very soul. "The body may forget, child, but the spirit remembers. And the blood always remembers. What is hidden is not truly lost." Her gaze dropped unerringly to Brea's left forearm. "It stirs, does it not? The mark of the Shadowfell, a king's claim, not merely on the flesh, but on the very soul." Brea instinctively covered the mark, her face flushing. "What is it?" she pleaded. "Why now? Why me? And what does Rurik mean by ancient power?" Hestia sighed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. The Shadowfell Pack, Brea, is built upon ancient bloodlines, a powerful confluence of human and wolf, bound by oaths to protect this land. But there is a darker current, too, a primal, chaotic magic that seeks to twist and corrupt that balance. It is drawn to strength, to potential, to the very essence of what makes us whole. And you, little one, carry a burden and a gift you do not yet comprehend. The shaman leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low conspiratorial whisper. The rogue that attacked you, it was not merely a beast. It was a harbinger, a servant of the encroaching darkness. They seek to extinguish the true light, to corrupt the purest bonds, to sever the very heart of the pack. And your bond, Brea, however broken it seemed, is a focal point, a key. A key to what? Brea asked, her mind reeling, her head aching with the weight of these revelations. To the awakening, Hestia murmured, her eyes distant, as if seeing beyond the walls of her cabin. Your wolflessness. It is not a weakness, Brea. It is a veil, a protection, a unique state that allows a different kind of power to brew within you, a power tied to the land itself, to the ancient spirits. The corrupted ones wish to harness that power, or to destroy it before it blossoms. And Rurik? Hestia's gaze sharpened, meeting Brea's with an intensity that belied her age. Rurik knows this. He feels it. His burden is immense. He chose to sever the public bond, to push you away, to make you appear undesirable, precisely because he knew that a public claim would make you an open target for this darkness. He hoped to hide your light in plain sight, to protect you by making you seem insignificant. A cold dread settled in Brea's stomach. Rurik's actions, once infuriating, now seemed born of a terrifying, self-sacrificing logic. He had taken on the mantle of villain to keep her safe. The shame he'd inflicted, the isolation she now endured, was a shield, but at what cost? And the men who had disappeared, were they truly just pathways he had removed, or had they become casualties of a war she hadn't even known she was fighting? The other wolf, Brea whispered, remembering the silver she-wolf. The one who saved me. Who was she? Hestia's gaze flickered, a strange mix of knowing and evasion. The forest has its own guardians, Brea, spirits of tooth and claw, ancient as the trees. They answer to a call deeper than pack law, older than kings. She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought. Or perhaps they answer to a bond that transcends all known forms. Suddenly, the air in the cabin shifted. The faint metallic tang intensified, sharp and acrid, like the corrupted rogue's scent. The warmth on Brea's forearm flared, the mark pulsing with an urgent, undeniable light. Hestia's eyes widened, a look of alarm replacing her serene wisdom. Danger, Hestia hissed, her voice sharp with warning. It senses you. The darkness is closer now. It seeks the mark, the awakening. You must go, Brea. Now. The door to Hestia's cabin creaked open, not from Brea's touch, but as if pulled by an unseen force. A gust of cold, foul-smelling air swept into the small room, extinguishing the fire with a soft hiss. Darkness descended, absolute and suffocating. Brea gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. She could feel a presence, cold and malevolent, just beyond the threshold. The mark on her arm burned, a beacon in the oppressive blackness, drawing the unseen threat directly to her. Just as a low, guttural growl, impossibly close, ripped through the air, vibrating through the very floorboards beneath her feet, Hestia's hand clamped onto Brea's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Go, find him! Only his blood can shield you now, she urged, pushing Brea towards the back window, away from the unseen terror at the door. He holds the key to your wolf's awakening. Brea stumbled backward, disoriented by the sudden darkness and Hestia's desperate plea. His blood, she questioned, utterly confused. But there was no time for answers. The growl intensified, closer, right inside the cabin now, accompanied by the wet, rasping sound of heavy breathing. Hestia shoved her harder, propelling her through the small window into the cold, moonless night. Brea landed awkwardly, scrambling to her feet, as a deafening crash erupted from inside the cabin, followed by a piercing shriek from Hestia that was abruptly cut short. The smell of decay and corruption filled the air, thick and nauseating. Brea didn't look back. She ran, blindly, the mark on her arm burning with agonizing intensity, a desperate beacon in the overwhelming darkness. She ran towards the only him Hestia could have meant, towards the terrifying, possessive Alpha King, Rurik Fenlo, whose blood Hestia had claimed was her only shield. The forest was a suffocating shroud, a living, breathing entity of shadows and unseen terrors. Brea ran, her lungs burning, her bare feet pounding against the cold, damp earth, each frantic step a desperate plea for escape. Hestia's scream, abruptly silenced, echoed in her mind, a horrifying testament to the danger that now stalked her. The stench of corruption, a foul, clinging odor of decay and malevolence, was an invisible predator at her heels, its foul breath chilling the air behind her. The silvery mark on her forearm pulsed with agonizing intensity, a throbbing beacon beneath her skin, guiding the unseen threat, and simultaneously pulling her towards the Alpha King. Find him, only his blood can shield you now. He holds the key to your wolf's awakening. Hestia's desperate words tore through Brea's consciousness, a frantic, jumbled prophecy. His blood, my wolf? The questions were a frantic drumbeat against the terror that clawed at her throat. She had no wolf. She was wolfless. And Rurik. Rurik was the man who had publicly rejected her, the king who watched from the shadows, the silent jailer. Yet Hestia, in her final terrifying moments, had pointed her towards him, towards the very source of her fear and her strange, unwanted tether. The village lights were long behind her, swallowed by the oppressive darkness of the ancient forest. Brea stumbled, catching herself on a gnarled root, her hands scraping against rough bark. She had no idea where she was going, only a desperate, primal urge to flee, and an inexplicable pull towards Rurik, a magnetic force that intensified with every beat of her heart, every throb of the mark on her arm. She could feel the presence behind her, heavy and relentless, gaining on her. It wasn't just one corrupted rogue, she realized with a sickening lurch, but several. A low, chittering sound, like claws on stone, accompanied by guttural snarls, filled the air, closing in. Panic, cold and absolute, threatened to paralyze her. But then, through the veil of fear, a new scent broke through the foul reek of corruption. Pine and winter storm, ancient forest and raw power. Rurik. His scent, usually a source of intimidating power, now felt like an anchor in the storm of her terror. It was stronger, closer, and it was moving towards her. Brea! His voice, a deep, resonant roar, ripped through the night, cutting through the chittering and snarls of the corrupted rogues. It wasn't a call, but a command, a primal bellow of fury and warning that vibrated through the very trees. In response, the corrupted creatures hesitated, their guttural sounds momentarily silenced. Suddenly, a massive form erupted from the shadows ahead, a blur of dark fur and raw power. It was Rurik, shifted into his wolf form. He was immense, a creature of myth, his fur the color of midnight, his eyes glowing with an incandescent golden light. He moved with a speed and ferocity that took Brea's breath away, a living embodiment of the storm and ancient forest his scent had always promised. He didn't come to her. He launched himself directly at the pursuing corrupted rogues. A whirlwind of snapping jaws and tearing claws. The forest exploded into a cacophony of growls, snarls, and the sickening sounds of battle. Rurik was a force unleashed, his movements precise and deadly, tearing through the corrupted beasts with a ruthless efficiency that was both terrifying and breathtaking. He was not just fighting, he was obliterating, his golden eyes blazing with a cold, righteous fury. Brea stumbled to a halt, hidden in the dense undergrowth, watching the brutal ballet of death unfold. The strength, the sheer untamed power of him, was overwhelming. This was the Alpha King, not merely a leader, but a primal force, a guardian born of the wild. He was protecting her, not with distance and calculated moves, but with his own raw strength, his teeth and claws. And in that moment, seeing him fight for her, a strange, undeniable warmth spread through Brea's chest, a warmth that resonated with the pulsating mark on her arm. It was a feeling she couldn't name, a primal recognition that bypassed fear and logic, reaching deep into the most ancient parts of her soul. Within minutes, it was over. The corrupted rogues lay broken and still, their foul scent slowly dissipating in the wake of Rurik's powerful presence. He stood over the last fallen beast, chest heaving, his dark fur matted with blood. Not his own, but that of his enemies. His golden eyes swept the clearing, searching, then finally locking onto Brea, hidden in the shadows. He didn't shift back immediately. Instead, he approached her in his wolf form, his steps slow and deliberate, his immense presence filling the clearing. The air vibrated with his power, a potent mix of dominance and a raw, protective intensity. He stopped just inches from her, his massive head lowering, his golden eyes burning into hers. She could feel the heat radiating from his fur, smell the musky scent of his wolf, the blood of his kills. It was terrifying, majestic, and utterly compelling. Then slowly, deliberately, he licked her scraped hand, his rough tongue a surprisingly gentle caress against her abraded skin. The touch was electric, a jolt of pure, raw connection that sent shivers through Brea's entire body. The mark on her forearm flared, throbbing intensely, and she felt a strange, internal shift, a loosening, a stirring in her own dormant spirit. It was as if his touch, his essence, was waking something deep within her, something that had been asleep for 25 years. He drew back, his golden eyes still fixed on hers. Then, with a fluid grace that defied his size, he began to shift. Muscles rippled and contracted, bones reformed, fur receded, until Rurik Fenlo stood before her, naked and magnificent, his body sculpted from power and ancient lineage. His dark hair was wild, his eyes still held a lingering flicker of golden light. He was breathtaking, terrifying, and utterly masculine. He didn't move to cover himself. His gaze never left hers, an unspoken intensity passing between them. He reached out, his hand coming to rest on her cheek, his thumb brushing gently along her jawline. His touch was warm, possessive, yet exquisitely tender. "Brea," he rumbled, his voice still rough from his wolf, but softened with a profound emotion she couldn't quite name. "Are you harmed?" Brea shook her head, unable to speak, mesmerized by the primal intensity in his eyes, by the raw power of his presence. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, his scent intoxicating. The mark on her arm throbbed, resonating with his closeness, with the touch of his hand on her skin. "Hestia, she's gone," Brea finally whispered, the horror of it washing over her anew. "The corrupted ones. They got her. She told me to find you. She said only your blood could shield me, that you held the key to my wolf's awakening." Rurik's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. A flash of pain, raw and brief, crossed his features at the mention of Hestia, quickly replaced by a fierce resolve. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm against her lips. The intimacy of the gesture was staggering, a stark contrast to his usual cold distance. "She was right," he murmured, his voice a low, guttural confession that sent shivers down Brea's spine. "The Shadowfell Pack has a sacred ritual, Brea, a bond of true mates, a sharing of blood that awakens the dormant wolf, that links the human and the spirit, forging an unbreakable tether to the land and to each other. It is reserved for those whose wolves are slow to manifest, or whose spirits are unique." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers, a vulnerability she had never seen before flickering in their golden depths. "It is a choice, Brea, a permanent claim. A bond beyond severance." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. A choice, a permanent claim, a mate bond, not the rejection he had given her, but a complete and utter taking. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, filled with an ancient hunger, a possessive longing that made Brea's breath hitch. She was no longer just a responsibility, a secret. She was a potential mate, a partner in a ritual of awakening, in a bond that would forever tie her to him, to his pack, to her dormant wolf. "I need your consent, Brea," Rurik whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze burning into hers. "To perform the ritual, to give you your wolf, to claim you fully and irrevocably as mine. It will protect you from the darkness, strengthen your spirit, and bind you to me in a way that no magic, no decree can ever break. But it is your choice." The weight of his words, the enormity of the decision, pressed in on Brea. She had always yearned for her wolf, for a place in the pack, for acceptance. Now it was being offered by the very man who had rejected her, the man who had secretly protected her, the man whose touch sent electric currents through her soul. But it came with a price. A permanent claim, an irrevocable bond to the Alpha King, a man of power and ruthlessness, whose protection had cost others their lives. As she looked into his golden eyes, seeing not just the alpha king, but the primal male who had just fought for her, who now stood naked and vulnerable before her. A choice formed in her heart, bypassing all logic, all fear. The mark on her arm pulsed, a silent affirmation, a deep, resonating hum that echoed the ancient, undeniable truth stirring within her. She knew with a certainty that transcended words that this was her path, her destiny, and she knew too that she was already his, in a way that had always defied severance. Yes, Brea whispered, her voice barely audible, but firm, her eyes locked with his. Yes, Rurik, I choose you. I choose my wolf. I choose this bond. A flicker of raw relief, of profound triumph, crossed Rurik's face. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that sent a wildfire through her veins. Then let us begin, he murmured against her mouth, his voice dark and husky, filled with a promise that made Brea's entire being tremble with anticipation. His lips finally claimed hers, a kiss that was both tender and fiercely possessive, a deep primal joining that sealed her choice, ignited her spirit, and set her on an irreversible path towards her awakening. As their lips met, the silvery mark on Brea's arm flared with a blinding, incandescent light, and she felt a sudden, exhilarating surge of power, a connection to Rurik, to the land, to her own true self, that was both terrifying and utterly glorious. The awakening had begun. The kiss was a conflagration, a wildfire that consumed all of Brea's fear, all of her past humiliation, leaving only pure, unadulterated sensation. Rurik's lips were firm, urgent, tasting of forest and power, and his scent, already intoxicating, now wrapped around her, pulling her into a vortex of primal connection. His hand cradled her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, a tender contrast to the fierce possessiveness of his mouth. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin against hers, the warmth of his breath, the insistent pressure of his claim. As their lips met, the silvery mark on Brea's arm didn't just pulse. It blazed, an incandescent light that seemed to draw all the latent power from the ancient forest into her very core. She felt a profound shift, a loosening of something deep within her, a sensation akin to a tightly wound spring finally releasing. It was exhilarating and terrifying, a surge of energy that made her tremble violently in his arms. It was the awakening. Rurik broke the kiss, his golden eyes, still alight with the lingering magic of his wolf, piercing hers. His chest heaved, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his control strained. The ritual must be done swiftly, he murmured, his voice thick with urgency and a raw primal hunger. The darkness will be drawn to this awakening. We must solidify the bond before it can be corrupted. He gently took her hand, his gaze falling upon the blazing mark on her forearm. This mark, Brea, it is not merely a symbol, it is the conduit. It pulses with your dormant wolf, with the ancient power Hestia spoke of. And it calls to mine. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to the glowing symbol, sending another jolt of electric current through her. Without another word, he led her deeper into the forest, not back towards the village, but towards a hidden glade Brea had never seen. The trees here were ancient, their branches interwoven like gnarled fingers, forming a natural canopy that blocked out the moon. In the center of the glade stood a single massive oak, its trunk wider than Brea's cabin, its roots burrowing deep into the earth. Runes, faint and ancient, were carved into its bark, glowing faintly with an internal light. The air here was heavy, humming with an unseen power, a sacred space. Rurik stopped before the tree, turning to face her. His nakedness was not an invitation, but a declaration, a stark testament to the raw, untamed nature of this ritual. He was completely himself, without artifice or pretense. He reached for her, his large hands carefully unfastening her tunic, his fingers brushing against her skin, sending shivers through her. She trembled, not from cold, but from the intensity of his gaze, the profound intimacy of his touch. He removed her clothes with a reverence that stole her breath, leaving her standing naked before him, exposed and vulnerable, yet utterly unashamed in his presence. He knelt before the ancient oak, his back to it, and extended his hand to her. Come, Brea, This is where we bind our souls, our wolves, our blood. Brea hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. His skin was warm, vibrant with life. She knelt opposite him, her knees sinking into the soft moss. The air thrummed with ancient magic. The runes on the tree pulsed with a deep, resonant light, reflecting in Rurik's golden eyes. He held her left hand, the one bearing the glowing mark, gently in his. Then, with a swift, almost imperceptible movement, he bit into his own wrist, drawing a thin line of dark, rich blood. It welled up, potent and shimmering, smelling of deep earth and primal power. He held his bleeding wrist to her lips. "Drink, Brea," he commanded, his voice a low primal growl. "Drink and accept your wolf. Drink and claim your bond." Brea stared at the dark blood, a moment of visceral revulsion warring with a deep, inexplicable pull. This was not merely blood. It was his essence, his power, his very being. Taking it was a profound act of surrender and acceptance. But her fear was overshadowed by the fierce, insistent pulsing of the mark on her arm, by the desperate longing for her wolf, by the undeniable connection she felt to this powerful, complex man. She leaned forward, her lips brushing against his wrist, then against the warm, metallic taste of his blood. It was rich, earthy, like the ancient forest itself, imbued with a potent, raw energy that flooded her senses. She drank, a small, tentative sip, then a deeper swallow. As the blood entered her, it was as if 1,000 dormant cells within her woke, a cascade of dormant power, a roar of recognition from a place deep within her that had been silent for so long. The mark on her arm flared, blindingly bright, and she felt a sudden, exhilarating rush, a primal hunger, a fierce, untamed spirit rising within her. Her vision blurred, the forest around her seemed to spin, colors and shapes merging into a vibrant tapestry. She felt a profound connection to the earth beneath her, to the rustling leaves above, to the very breath of the wind. A growl, impossibly deep, rumbled in her chest, not from Rurik, but from her. It was a sound she had never made, a sound of pure, untamed wolf. Rurik watched her, his eyes blazing, a profound satisfaction in their depths. As she drank, he shifted his grip, his thumb finding the mark on her forearm, pressing down gently. A jolt, sharp and exquisite, shot through her, and Brea gasped, her eyes flying open. His gaze was intense, possessive, challenging. "Now, Brea," he rumbled, his voice thick with primal power. "Your turn to claim mine." He released her wrist, and then, with his own hand, he took hers, guiding her fingers to his neck, to the pulsing vein beneath his jaw. "Your mark, Brea, the first claim, the binding." His meaning was clear. She was to bite him, to draw his blood, to complete the circle, to seal the bond. Her hands trembled, her newly awakened senses overwhelmed by the scent of his skin, the beat of his heart against her fingertips, the sheer power radiating from him. The raw, untamed part of her, the wolf that was now roaring to life, recognized this as the ultimate act of claiming, of dominance and surrender intertwined. She leaned in, her gaze locked with his, seeing a fierce anticipation in his golden eyes. Her teeth, impossibly sharp, seemed to lengthen, an instinctive response to the primal urge that now surged through her. She bit, a quick, clean nip, just enough to break the skin, to draw a pearl of his rich, dark blood. The taste of it, mixed with the musky scent of his skin, was intoxicating, electrifying. As her fangs grazed his flesh, the mark on her arm flared once more, and this time, Brea felt it solidify, integrate, becoming a permanent part of her, a living symbol of her bond to Rurik, to her awakened wolf, to the Shadowfell. A shiver ran through Rurik, a low guttural growl rumbling in his chest, a sound of profound satisfaction and triumphant claim. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her against his naked chest. His skin was hot against hers, his heart thrumming a powerful rhythm beneath her ear. "It is done," he murmured, his voice husky, filled with an ancient power. "You are mine, Brea, and I irrevocably am yours. The bond is forged in blood and spirit. No darkness can touch you now, not while I breathe." Brea clung to him, her body still trembling from the intensity of the ritual, from the overwhelming rush of her awakening. She could feel her wolf, a fierce protective presence stirring within her, a primal consciousness that now shared her mind. It was a sensation of profound wholeness, of belonging, of a power she had never dreamed possible. She was no longer wolfless, no longer barren, no longer an omega adrift. She was a mate, a partner, a part of the Alpha King, her spirit irrevocably bound to his. He lifted her face, his gaze sweeping over her, a possessive tenderness in his eyes. "Feel it, Brea," he whispered. "Your wolf, she is strong, she is true." Brea nodded, tears blurring her vision. She could feel it, a powerful protective instinct, a keen awareness of her surroundings, a surge of strength she had never possessed. Her senses were sharpened, the scent of the forest now a symphony of distinct aromas, the rustle of leaves a language she could almost understand. But just as she began to revel in this newfound power, a shadow fell over the glade, not from the trees, but from above. The humming of ancient magic intensified. But this time, it was distorted, tainted by the same foul, decaying stench that had clung to the corrupted rogues. The runes on the ancient oak flickered wildly, then dimmed, their light struggling against an encroaching darkness. A cold, malevolent presence descended, pressing in on the glade, a crushing weight that stole the air from Brea's lungs. Rurik stiffened, his body tensing, his golden eyes blazing with renewed fury and alarm. He pulled Brea behind him, shielding her with his body, a low, guttural growl ripping from his throat. The forest went silent, utterly, terrifyingly still. "They found us," Rurik rasped, his voice tight with controlled rage. "The darkness has followed the awakening." A chorus of low, chittering sounds, accompanied by the wet, rasping breath of corrupted beasts, erupted from the shadows at the edge of the glade. This time there were more of them, their yellow eyes glowing with malevolent triumph. They were not merely rogues, they were a legion, a tide of twisted ancient evil, drawn by the profound power of the mate bond, by the awakening of Brea's unique wolf. Rurik turned to face them, his form immense and powerful, a formidable barrier against the encroaching darkness. But even his immense power seemed to falter against the sheer number of the corrupted. Brea, her newly awakened wolf stirring fiercely within her, felt a surge of defiant power. She was no longer helpless. She was bound, she was claimed, and she was ready to fight. She felt the ancient primal strength flowing through her veins, a power that resonated with the Alpha King's own, a united force against the encroaching shadow. But as Rurik braced himself for the onslaught, a dark, swirling void opened above the ancient oak, and from it a figure emerged. Not a corrupted beast, but something far more sinister. A cloaked entity, its face obscured, its presence radiating an ancient, cold malice that made the very air crackle with malevolent energy. It was the source of the corruption, the true enemy, and its gaze, unseen yet undeniably felt, was fixed on Brea. The cloaked entity that descended from the swirling void above the ancient oak exuded a palpable aura of cold malice, a presence so ancient and malevolent it seemed to drain the very warmth from the glade. Its face was a shadowed void beneath its cowl, yet Brea felt its unseen gaze lock onto her, a chilling weight that pierced to her soul. This was not a creature of brute force like the corrupted rogues, but something far more insidious, a master of dark arts. The source of the insidious corruption that had plagued the Packlands. Rurik, his body coiled and tense, reacted instantly. He pulled Brea further behind him, his immense form a protective shield, a low guttural growl rumbling deep in his chest. His golden eyes, still blazing with the fire of his wolf, narrowed into slits of pure fury. The sheer number of corrupted rogues now swarming the edges of the glade was overwhelming, their chittering growls a discordant symphony of approaching death. But Rurik's attention remained fixed on the cloaked figure, recognizing it as the true architect of the encroaching darkness. "They seek to undo the bond," Rurik rasped, his voice tight, laced with a desperate urgency. "To corrupt your awakening, to claim the ancient power you now embody. Do not let them touch you, Brea, not for a moment." He didn't wait. With a primal roar that echoed through the glade, Rurik launched himself at the approaching tide of corrupted beasts. He was a force of nature unleashed, a whirlwind of dark fur, teeth, and claws, tearing through the rogues with a ferocious, unyielding power. He fought with a desperate savagery, his movements a blur of controlled violence, intent on clearing a path, on buying time. Brea, her newly awakened wolf stirring fiercely within her, watched in a terrifying mix of awe and dread. She could feel the connection to Rurik, a powerful, almost tangible thread of shared strength and primal intent. Her senses were heightened, the sounds of battle, the stench of corruption, the very pulse of the ancient glade, all amplified. Her heart hammered, not solely from fear, but from the raw, untamed power now coursing through her veins. Her wolf, silent for so long, now roared for release, for the chance to join the fray, to fight beside her mate. But Rurik's command echoed in her mind. Do not let them touch you. He was buying her time, but for what? The cloaked figure, seemingly unfazed by Rurik's onslaught, began to move, gliding through the chaos of battle towards Brea, with an unnerving, silent grace. It raised a hand, and the air around it crackled with dark energy. Shadows seemed to detach from the trees, swirling and coalescing into spectral forms, wisps of dark smoke that reached for Brea, their touch cold and suffocating. Brea instinctively recoiled, her wolf's instinct screaming danger. She remembered Hestia's final words. Only his blood can shield you now. But Rurik was engaged, fighting for their lives against an overwhelming tide. He couldn't shield her directly. She had to find her own defense. A surge of defiant power erupted from deep within her. The mark on her arm blazed, a shield of light against the encroaching shadows. She felt a connection, not just to Rurik, but to the ancient oak behind her, to the very earth beneath her feet. The dormant power Hestia spoke of, tied to the land, now pulsed with undeniable strength. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth of the mark, on the fierce, protective presence of her wolf. She thought of Rurik, of his strength, his courage, his unwavering protection, even in rejection. She felt the essence of his blood still thrumming in her veins, a potent source of power, and then she opened her eyes. Her vision had changed. The glade was no longer merely a collection of trees and shadows. She saw the intricate web of energy that connected everything, the ancient runes on the oak pulsing with green light, the faint shimmering threads of life in every leaf, the dark, insidious tendrils of malice emanating from the cloaked figure. She saw the spectral shadows as concentrations of corrupted energy, not physical beings. Her wolf snarled within her, a silent internal roar. She raised her left hand, the mark blazing, and focused her will, drawing upon the power of the land, upon the strength of her mate bond, upon the ancient magic now awakened within her. A wave of pure concentrated energy, shimmering with the same silvery light as her mark, erupted from her hand, slamming into the spectral shadows. They recoiled, shrieking, dissipating into wisps of smoke as the light touched them. The cloaked figure paused, its head tilting, an unseen expression of surprise emanating from its shadowed cowl. It had not expected this. Brea, the wolfless Omega, was fighting back, wielding a power it had sought to corrupt or destroy. The battle raged around her. Rurik, seeing Brea's newfound power, fought with renewed ferocity, his golden eyes blazing with pride and a fierce determination. He was cutting a swath through the corrupted rogues, moving closer, trying to reach her. The cloaked figure, recovering from its surprise, raised both hands. The ground beneath Brea's feet began to tremble, and gnarled roots, thick as serpents, erupted from the earth, twisting and writhing, reaching for her, attempting to ensnare her. The air grew colder, heavy with a suffocating pressure. Brea remained defiant. Her wolf roared, a surge of adrenaline and primal will. She felt the energy of the land, the ancient oak, flowing into her, strengthening her. She slammed her foot down, channeling her power, and the roots recoiled, shriveling and turning to ash. She was not just a conduit, she was a wielder. The cloaked figure shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and frustration. It was a sound that tore through the glade, silencing even the battle for a moment. It abandoned its attack on Brea, turning its full, malevolent attention to Rurik. It had clearly underestimated the awakened mate, and now sought to eliminate the Alpha King, the stronger, more immediate threat to its plan. A bolt of pure shadow energy, black and corrosive, shot from its hands, striking Rurik mid-battle. The Alpha King roared, a sound of agony, as the darkness slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his powerful wolf form struggling, his golden eyes flickering, struggling against the corrupting force. The corrupted rogues, seeing their king fall, surged forward, their chittering growls turning into triumphant snarls. "Rurik!" Brea screamed, her heart clenching with a terror far greater than any she had felt for herself. Seeing him fall, seeing his power waver, ignited a fierce, protective fury within her, a primal rage she hadn't known she possessed. Her wolf howled, a desperate, mournful cry that ripped through her soul. She pushed herself forward, abandoning her defensive stance, her entire being focused on him. Her mark blazed, her hands glowing with silvery energy. She moved with an instinctive grace, a speed she didn't know she had, drawing upon the full force of her awakened power, fueled by her love for Rurik, by her desperate need to protect him. The cloaked figure turned back to her, its unseen gaze filled with contempt. It unleashed another wave of shadow tendrils, darker, more potent than before, aiming to consume her, to snuff out her defiant light. But Brea was ready. She met the attack head-on, a fierce cry tearing from her lips. She channeled every ounce of her newfound power, every drop of Rurik's blood still thrumming in her veins, every ounce of her wolf's awakened strength into a single blinding wave of pure, radiant light. It erupted from her, a supernova of silver energy that slammed into the shadow tendrils, obliterating them instantly. The light pulsed outward, consuming the darkness, pushing back the corrupted rogues, making them shriek and recoil. It was a force of pure, untamed light, fueled by the deepest, most primal love and protection. The cloaked figure shrieked again, a sound of genuine pain and terror, as Brea's light engulfed it, ripping through its dark essence. It writhed, its form flickering, struggling against the overwhelming power that emanated from the newly awakened mate. Rurik, slowly pushing himself up, his eyes now blazing with renewed golden light, watched Brea. He saw not the wolfless Omega, but a goddess of light, a fierce, powerful queen, wielding a magic that surpassed even his own. A profound sense of awe, of pride, and of an ancient, undeniable love filled him. The cloaked figure, unable to withstand the pure, unadulterated power of Brea's light, let out a final, ear-splitting shriek, its form dissolving into wisps of dark smoke that were swiftly consumed by Brea's radiant energy. The corrupted rogues, leaderless and terrified, whimpered, turning to flee, scrambling back into the shadows of the forest, their foul stench finally retreating. Brea stood amidst the fading light, her chest heaving, her body trembling with the aftershocks of the immense power she had wielded. The mark on her arm still glowed, but with a softer, more stable light. She was exhausted, drained, but filled with an exhilarating sense of triumph and newfound strength. Her wolf was silent now, content, a powerful presence resting within her, a part of her, irrevocably and completely. She turned to Rurik, her heart overflowing. He had shifted back into his human form, his body bruised and battered but whole, his golden eyes fixed on her with an expression of profound adoration and reverence. He rose, walking towards her, his gaze never leaving hers. "Brea," he breathed, his voice husky with emotion. "My queen, my mate, you saved us all." He reached for her, his powerful arms wrapping around her, pulling her into a fierce, tender embrace. His lips found hers, a kiss of triumph, of love, of an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of battle. The moon, now visible through the clearing canopy, cast its silvery light upon them, bathing them in a sacred glow. The glade was quiet again, the air cleansed of corruption, filled now with the scent of pine, earth, and the potent mingling aromas of two powerful, intertwined souls. Brea, held in Rurik's strong arms, knew then that her journey had led her not to freedom, but to a far greater destiny, a true claiming, a true belonging, and a fierce, undeniable power that had been waiting beneath the moonlight's veil, waiting for her to awaken. The battle was over, the darkness repelled, but the true test of their bond, of their combined strength, was yet to come. The Shadowfell pack had been saved, but the world beyond their borders still harbored dangers, and Brea knew, with a certainty, that her journey with Rurik, with her wolf, had only just begun. Their combined power would be needed again, for the shadows, though pushed back, were never truly vanquished. The aftermath of battle hung heavy in the air, a strange mix of lingering ozone from Brea's light and the acrid tang of vanquished corruption. Rurik held her close, his embrace fierce and possessive, a silent testament to their unbreakable bond. His lips on hers were a balm, a promise, a declaration that spoke deeper than any words. Brea, trembling from the immense power she had wielded, clung to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest, the solid strength of his body. Her wolf, now a vibrant, protective presence within her, purred, a low, contented hum that resonated with Rurik's own primal satisfaction. The glade, once a battleground, was now quiet, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the moon. The ancient oak, its runes still faintly pulsing, seemed to hum with approval. Brea looked into Rurik's golden eyes, seeing not just the Alpha King, but the warrior who had fought for her, the mate who had claimed her, the man whose vulnerability she had glimpsed, and whose strength she now shared. "We must return," Rurik finally murmured, his voice husky, his breath warm against her ear. "The pack will be searching, and the darkness, though repelled, it is not vanquished." He pulled back slightly, his gaze sweeping over her, a possessive tenderness in their depths. "Are you truly well, my mate?" Brea nodded, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady, "stronger than I ever imagined." She felt a new lightness in her step, a heightened awareness of every rustle, every scent, every distant sound. Her wolf was awake, a part of her, her senses fused with its primal instincts. Rurik retrieved their clothes, his movements fluid and powerful even in his exhaustion. He dressed quickly, his dark eyes never leaving her as she pulled on her tunic, still feeling the lingering heat of his touch on her skin. The silvery mark on her forearm, now a permanent, intricate tattoo, pulsed with a soft, steady light, no longer an agonizing beacon, but a symbol of her newfound strength and undeniable claim. They moved through the forest, a silent, formidable pair. The path seemed clearer now to Brea, her wolf's senses guiding her, seeing details in the darkness that her human eyes would have missed. Rurik walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a comforting, possessive touch. The air, though still carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, now felt cleansed, lighter. As they neared the village, a collective gasp rippled through the assembled pack. They were gathered in the square, their faces etched with fear and concern, torches flickering in the night. The scent of worry, fear, and a pervasive sadness hung heavy in the air. Their faces turned, their eyes widening as they saw Rurik, bruised but unharmed, and Brea, walking beside him, her head held high, her presence radiating a power that was impossible to ignore. Whispers erupted, then died into stunned silence as Rurik led Brea to the center of the square, before the communal fire pit. The pack stared, their gazes darting from Rurik to Brea, seeing the unspoken bond, the changed woman, the undeniable claim that now pulsed between them. Hestia's absence, the cold, empty space of her cabin, was a stark reminder of the night's cost. Rurik's voice, a deep, resonant rumble, cut through the silence. "The darkness sought to claim one of our own tonight, to corrupt an ancient power awakening within our pack, but it was repelled. Our shaman, Hestia, paid the ultimate price protecting that awakening, protecting our future." A wave of grief rippled through the pack, low murmurs of sorrow echoing in the night. Rurik's gaze then settled on Brea, a profound tenderness in his golden eyes that astonished the assembled wolves. "Brea Whitlock," he declared, his voice ringing with authority and a fierce pride. Once cast aside, was tonight claimed by fate. Her silent wolf has awakened. Her dormant power, tied to the ancient spirits of this land, has blossomed. She is no longer wolfless, no longer merely an omega. She is my mate, she is your queen, and her strength, forged in fire, has saved us all. A collective gasp, a mix of awe and disbelief, swept through the pack. The silent, ostracized omega, the woman publicly rejected, was now their queen, their alpha's mate. Brea felt the weight of their gazes, the shift in their perceptions. There was still apprehension, perhaps, but also a dawning respect, a reluctant acceptance. She met their eyes, her wolf's instinct prompting her to stand taller, to meet their gazes with an unwavering strength. The mark on her arm pulsed, a silent declaration of her new identity. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, a blur of pack rituals and quiet mourning. Hestia was laid to rest in a sacred glade, her memory honored with ancient songs and solemn vows. Brea carried the weight of Hestia's sacrifice deeply, a constant reminder of the price of her awakening. Rurik, ever the stoic leader, seemed to carry the grief in his bones, his jawline perpetually tight. Brea spent her days learning to harness her awakened wolf. The connection was seamless, exhilarating. She could feel the subtle shifts in the wind, hear the distant calls of the forest creatures, identify scents from miles away. Her speed and agility increased. Her strength bloomed. Rurik, with a patience she hadn't known he possessed, guided her, teaching her to shift, to control her newfound power. Their private moments were filled with an intimacy that transcended physical touch. They spoke of the pack, of the encroaching darkness, of Hestia's prophecies. Brea learned of Rurik's immense burden, the constant pressure of protecting his people, of making impossible choices. He revealed the ancient history of the Shadowfell, the constant battle against the forces of corruption, the reason he had chosen to reject her publicly, to hide her, to protect her unique essence from a foe he knew was drawn to power. He had truly loved her enough to push her away, to bear the weight of her perceived abandonment, all to keep her safe. This revelation shattered any lingering resentment, replacing it with a profound, aching love for him. One evening, as they stood by the river, Brea finally shifted for the first time. The transformation was breathtaking, a rush of power and primal instinct. Her fur was the color of moonlight on fresh snow, her eyes a startling, intelligent blue, the same color as the mysterious she-wolf who had saved her. A gasp tore from Rurik's throat. "The silver wolf," he breathed, his golden eyes wide with awe. "It was you, Brea. Your silent wolf protecting itself, protecting you even before the ritual. Hestia knew. She called you Little Wolf because she saw your true nature." The revelation sent a shiver down Brea's spine, a profound understanding settling within her. She had saved herself unknowingly. The powerful, protective she-wolf was indeed her, an aspect of her dormant power, fighting for survival. This meant her wolf had manifested, however subtly, long before Rurik's ritual, a testament to her unique strength. Their bond deepened, becoming an intricate dance of shared power and understanding. Rurik leaned on her, sought her counsel, honored her strength. Brea, in turn, found in him not just a mate, but a partner, a king who respected her, who loved her in a way that defied words. The pack, though still wary, began to accept her, seeing her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering loyalty to Rurik. But the peace was fragile. The shadows, though repelled, had not truly vanished. The lingering stench of corruption, though faint, occasionally tainted the wind. Brea's awakened senses often picked up faint traces of the cloaked entity's malice, an unseen ripple in the fabric of the forest. The knowledge that the true enemy, the master of the corrupted, was still out there, regrouping, planning, weighed heavily on them both. One night, Brea woke with a gasp, her wolf howling within her. She had seen a vision, a dark ritual, deep within the forbidden mountains beyond the Shadowfell lands, the cloaked figure standing over a glowing, pulsating orb of malevolent energy. It was creating something, drawing on a power far greater than the corrupted rogues they had faced. It was a new threat, a deeper darkness, aimed directly at the heart of their pack, at the very essence of their ancient bloodlines. She jolted upright, her heart pounding, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rurik, stirred by her distress, was instantly awake, his hand already on the dagger beneath his pillow. "Brea, what is it?" he asked, his voice low, sharp with concern. Brea looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. The image of the orb, of the cloaked figure, burned into her mind. "The darkness," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not just rogues, Rurik. It's a greater power, a ritual. They are building something, a weapon, and it's coming for us. Coming for the heart of the Shadowfell." She clutched his arm, her gaze desperate. "It's coming for our blood, our combined power. It wants to twist it, to claim it for itself." The silvery mark on her arm pulsed, a warning, a beacon, drawing the imminent danger to them like a moth to a flame. The true battle, the ultimate confrontation, was not over. It was about to begin. The vision, stark and chilling, clung to Brea, even as the comforting warmth of Rurik's arms enveloped her. The pulsating orb, the cloaked figure, the sheer malevolence of the impending threat. It was not a nightmare, but a premonition, clear and urgent. The true battle, the one Hestia had hinted at, was upon them. They faced it together. The journey to the Forbidden Mountains was fraught with peril, a landscape twisted by dark magic. But Brea was no longer the trembling Omega. Her silver wolf, powerful and swift, moved with an instinct born of ancient forest and awakened spirit. Rurik, a formidable force in his midnight wolf form, was her shadow, her strength, her unwavering partner. Their bond, forged in blood and fire, was a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The final confrontation took place in a cavernous chamber, deep within the mountains, where the air thrummed with corrupt magic. The cloaked figure stood before a massive pulsating orb, a grotesque heart of shadow and despair, siphoning the life force from the very earth. Twisted, monstrous creatures, far more powerful than the rogues they'd previously faced, guarded their master. Rurik roared, a sound of primal fury that shook the cavern walls, and launched himself into the fray, a whirlwind of teeth and claws. Brea, shifting seamlessly into her silver wolf, moved with breathtaking speed and grace, her blue eyes blazing with fierce determination. But it was not just brute strength they wielded. Brea's awakened power, the silvery light that could dispel darkness, became their most potent weapon. As Rurik tore through the corrupted guards, Brea focused on the cloaked figure. The entity, confident in its power, met her with waves of chilling dread, attempting to paralyze her with fear. But Brea's wolf spirit was unyielding. She saw the intricate web of dark magic connecting the figure to the orb, to the very corruption of the land. Channeling the power of the ancient earth, the essence of her mate bond, and the pure, untainted light within her, she unleashed a torrent of shimmering silver energy. The cloaked figure shrieked, a sound of pure agony, as Brea's light ripped through its defenses, severing its connection to the orb. The massive orb pulsed erratically, its malevolent glow flickering. Rurik, seeing his opportunity, shifted back to his human form, his body radiating immense power. He stood naked and magnificent, his golden eyes blazing, and with a guttural roar, he plunged his hand into the dying orb, tearing out its corrupted heart. The cavern shuddered, the ground shaking as the orb imploded, releasing a final deafening shriek of vanquished evil. The darkness recoiled, retreating from the mountains, leaving behind a profound stillness. Rurik, his chest heaving, looked at Brea, who had shifted back, equally exhausted, equally triumphant. Their eyes met, and in that shared gaze was a profound understanding, a love that had moved mountains and banished shadows. They had saved their world. The journey back was one of quiet triumph. The land, once blighted, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its vibrancy slowly returning. The pack welcomed them with a reverence that brought tears to Brea's eyes. No longer was she the marked Omega. She was their queen, their savior, the silver wolf who walked beside their king. In the months that followed, the Shadowfell pack began to heal. The lingering fear that had permeated their lives slowly dissipated, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and security. Brea, with Rurik by her side, became an integral part of their leadership. Her unique connection to the ancient spirits of the land, her intuitive understanding of the subtle currents of magic, proved invaluable. She brought a wisdom and compassion that tempered Rurik's formidable strength, creating a balance that resonated throughout the pack. The disappearances, a chilling testament to the cloaked figure's early influence, ceased entirely. There was no longer a need for Rurik's brutal, silent protection. The pathways were gone, the lure extinguished, the ancient power within Brea, now a shield, not a beacon for malevolence. They mourned those lost. Hestia, Garrick, Tobin, Fendrel, remembering their sacrifices, understanding now the true scope of the war they had unknowingly been a part of. Their names were etched into the memorial stones, a testament to the cost of their freedom. Brea's cabin, once a symbol of her isolation, now hummed with life. It was here, in the quiet moments, that her bond with Rurik deepened beyond the primal and the powerful, into something exquisitely tender and profoundly intimate. He no longer kept his distance, no longer hid his emotions behind a stoic mask. His large hands, once reserved for command, now sought hers, his touch a language of love and unwavering devotion. He would trace the intricate silvery mark on her forearm, a symbol of their shared destiny, a quiet reverence in his golden eyes. One crisp autumn evening, as the first stars began to pepper the twilight sky, Rurik found Brea by the ancient oak in the glade where their bond had been forged. She was speaking softly to the tree, her fingers brushing its ancient bark, a faint iridescent glow emanating from her touch. Her wolf, a contented presence within her, stretched, perfectly at peace. Rurik approached silently, wrapping his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his solid chest. His chin rested on her shoulder, his lips brushing her temple. "What secrets does the Old One whisper to you tonight, my queen?" he murmured, his voice a low, warm rumble that sent shivers of pleasure through her. Brea smiled, leaning into his embrace. "It speaks of life, of cycles, of enduring strength. It feels the healing of the land, Rurik. It feels our peace." She turned in his arms, her gaze sweeping over his strong, scarred face. The scar that bisected his brow, once a symbol of his fearsome power, now simply added to the rugged beauty of his features. There was a softness in his golden eyes now, a vulnerability reserved only for her, a depth of emotion that spoke volumes. "My king," she whispered, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You carry such burdens, yet you never falter. You gave me freedom by rejecting me, then claimed me wholly to save me. You bore the pack's judgment and my own pain, all to protect this." She gestured between them to the invisible, unbreakable tether that bound their souls. "I never understood true love until you showed me its fiercest form." Rurik's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb gently caressing her cheek. "And I never understood true partnership, true belonging, until you stood beside me, Brea. You are the light that banishes my shadows, the voice that quiets my doubts, the heart that completes my own." He leaned in, his lips finding hers in a slow, tender kiss that spoke of years of shared understanding, of battles won, of a love that had blossomed from impossible odds. The fears that had once defined Brea, of being wolfless, barren, and omega, were long gone. Her wolf soared, a part of her soul, and the barrenness too had proven to be a lie the darkness had perpetuated. 6 months after the great purging, Brea had felt a new life stir within her, a profound connection to the ancient cycles of their land. Now, as she stood wrapped in Rurik's arms, a gentle curve hinted at the life growing within her, a promise of their future, a testament to the enduring strength of their bloodline. Rurik lowered his head, his hand resting gently on her belly, his golden eyes filled with a profound, almost overwhelming joy. "A new generation," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "A child of the Silver Wolf and the Shadowfell King, the future of our pack, Brea. Our legacy." Brea leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart overflowing. The moon, full and benevolent, cast its silver light upon them, illuminating the ancient glade, the symbol of their unwavering love. She was no longer just Brea Whitlock, the rejected Omega. She was queen, mate, mother, warrior, protector. She was whole. She was powerful. She was loved. And with Rurik by her side, their hearts steadfast, their bond unbreakable, the Shadowfell pack would forever thrive, protected by a love as fierce and as eternal as the ancient forest itself. This was not merely an ending, but a glorious, unending beginning.